You're listening to a podcast by the Center for Action and Contemplation. To learn more, visit cac.org.
Hey everybody, this is Jacqui Lewis, and this is a special mini-series of Love Period, in which we're focusing on Black History Month. Of course, you and I know that Black history is American history, but my guests are going to bring special perspectives about what it means to be Black in America in these days. And I hope you enjoy these conversations. I am so delighted to welcome Drew Jackson to Love Period today. Hey, Drew.
Hey, Jacqui. So glad to be here with you.
How you doing?
I'm doing well today. Today's been good. Today has been good. It's been a slow morning, so I appreciate that.
You had a little bit of some trauma with the church on the weekend, huh?
Yeah, well, it was actually, I had gotten a call MLK Day that morning that the fire department had to come into our building and shut off the sprinklers because there was a burst pipe that had set off the sprinkler system. There was water all in the sanctuary, water all in the basement. So I've been dealing with that for the past couple of weeks. Finally, things are in a good spot, but it was a mess.
That burst pipe water thing is not a happy experience. That is a fact. That is a fact. What did you do for MLK Day? What did you guys do? How did you mark the day? Besides that,
well, I was just home with my daughters. That was. So yeah, I have 7-year-olds. They're twins, and we talked a little history and just got to spend some time together. And that was my day.
That's a beautiful way to do the day. So you have 7-year-old twins. What are you teaching 7-year-old girls about Black history?
Well, it's important for us to think in the face of everything that's going on right now, to have them have a sense of rootedness, a sense of belonging, understanding that they belong to a long lineage of people who have continued to learn how to show up fully as themselves, you know? When so much has tried to dampen our voices as a people. Yep. I think it's been important for us to really try to teach them as young Black girls in whatever space they're in to show up fully as themselves. And they're 7 years old, but they read all the time. They read all the time. So, and they get that from us. I mean, my wife, I mentioned she works at the bookstore. She's constantly bringing home books. And they love to read those the sort of like little leader books that highlight. And so we have them read those and we talk. They ask questions. Gotcha. They ask questions about people. You know, they're asking questions about, you know, tell me who is Ella Fitzgerald? Let's talk about Ella. You know, let's talk about Billie Holiday. You know, let's talk about Ida B. Wells. So I just letting them know what their lineage is and what they have to receive from and carry forward.
I'm so impressed with that, Drew. So you, your wife, the 2 girls, the twins, live in New York, and you are raising leaders to continue to show up, to learn to show up fully as themselves. Part of the lineage that you and I share is the lineage of Black people, period. But what about your particular story, Drew? What's your family story? Can you tell a little bit about that?
So I grew up in South Jersey, just across the bridge from Philly.
Which town?
In a town called Williamstown.
Okay.
So I'm the youngest of 4 boys.
Okay.
My mom, she's from Philly. She grew up in the Richard Allen projects in North Philly.
Oh, okay. Okay.
My dad was born in Harlem. Their family moved to South Jersey when he was about 7 or 8, but continued to come up and spend time here in the city because we still have family here. You know, interestingly enough, like my parents, we came up in the church, but the church that my brothers and I came up in was a particularly fundamentalist brand of independent Baptists. You know, we kind of came up in that sphere, but it was always in a sense of like my parents never fully bought in, even though they were there. you know,
were they inside resistors?
They were. Mm-hmm. So we would, you know, I could tell a lot of stories about it, but I think what I learned from them growing up was just they would take it upon themselves to teach us the things that we weren't being taught elsewhere. whether it be in church or in school. That was just who they were. And I think they got that from their parents. My grandfather on my dad's side grew up in Anderson, South Carolina. But my dad used to tell me that he would not talk about what he saw and witnessed growing up. He wouldn't talk about it. He would get angry anytime there was news of racial violence that came across the radio or the television. And yet there was this sort of imparting of we have to acknowledge it, we have to stand against it, but there's something in my grandfather that it was trauma that he did not know how to process. And so I think what I learned from my dad was more of how do we begin to process the trauma? How do we begin to engage it? And interestingly enough, I went to, I guess a couple of months ago at this point, I went down to the Equal Justice Initiative Memorial.
Oh, yeah.
And I have been wanting to get down there. Part of the reason is because I wanted to go and see, what happened in Anderson. If there's some history in Anderson that I need to know about.
Right.
So when I went, I ended up finding on the memorial for Anderson County, there was a man named Will Jackson, who had been lynched.
Is he related to you?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I know that he was lynched right around the time that my grandfather would have been there. Anderson's not a very big place. It certainly wasn't at the time. And so I looked up his story, and there were, newspaper clippings from that time. And it was one of those lynchings where the whole town came out. He was accused of raping a white woman, was chased, and they lynched him. And it says in the newspaper clippings that his mother and his family, they were so embarrassed by what happened that they sort of wouldn't even come to bury him. My interpretation of that is that they were so intimidated that the fear of what was happening during that time and, that there was basically they were intimidated out of even offering dignity to their boy.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I know that my grandfather eventually left the town and never looked back. So I don't know if that's my relative, but it's highly likely.
Wow. I've been to that museum, and in fact, listeners, if you do anything about making a sojourn in this country, go there to the museum and both parts of it, right, Drew?
Both parts of it.
The testimony to the lynchings, these, I'm going to say they look like funeral pyres.
Yeah.
They're just big, markers of human death. And this last time, my husband and I went on a sabbatical this summer, Drew, and we did a South tour. We went around and did some research on Black folks' religion and white folks' craziness. I'm just going to call it that. But this time, reading the stories, the short stories of why Jackson was lynched or Johnson was lynched, or the correlation between anything sexual about a white lady, tipped his hat, gave her his business card, knocked on the door, right, was seen talking to. I could not Emmett Till flirt, not rape, just an encounter with the white woman was enough. Wow, right?
Just an encounter.
Just an encounter.
Yeah, it's the refusal to allow Blackness into your space.
Yes, yes, yes. And the presumption that the Blackness in the space is violent or loathsome or predatory or over-sexual or any of that is one of the fault lines on American life. Did you take your girls? Did you take your girls and your wife? Did you go by yourself?
No, I went. I was part of a cohort of some pastors from around the country that had went, and it was a South American South trip. that we ended in Montgomery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We started in New Orleans, went to then Jackson, Mississippi,
Ooh.
from Jackson to Selma, from Selma to Montgomery.
It's an interesting journey to take. And when you think about raising daughters, Drew, in the North, what are the lessons you want them to have about Black folks' lives in the South?
When I was on this trip, one of the people that we got to spend some time with was Medgar Evers' daughter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Rena Evers.
Yep.
And just spending time with her, telling her own story, talk about the time she had with her father and the night that he was killed by Klansmen for speaking up, for challenging the status quo, for advocating for voting rights, for being a threat, for being seen as a threat. And I think when I think about even that and her, the thing that, she said, she was telling us the story of just how her memory of her dad was coming into her room at night, tucking her into bed, and her asking her dad the question, "Dad, do all white people hate us?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Being a 7-year-old girl. And so it took me right into these moments with my daughters. And her dad took that moment to speak reality, but not to tear down folks, but to sort of forge a path for her of saying, it is our job to keep loving, to keep being a force for good in the world, essentially.
Yeah.
And in the face of all that is. And she's like, that's the thing that I remember most, that she carries with her, that she continues to tell that story. And so when I think about my daughters and all that is still happening today, but also just the history, it's the question of, how are we being honest with them?
Yeah.
About what is.
Yes.
But also, what's the invitation to what does it mean to be formed as people who know how to love in this world in the face of everything that is deforming us in the opposite direction,
Oh, yes. Did you go to that museum in Jackson?
I did.
Oh, my God. Of all of the museums, including the one in D.C., that to me is the best curation of this story that is our story. What do you think? Wasn't it powerful?
It was really powerful. And are you talking about the two Mississippi's museum?
Oh, yes.
Now, did you go to both sides?
Oh, yes.
Because one of the things we talked about was the choice that they made as a museum to have a two narrative sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me. I think that the choice to do that in one sense is really powerful, because it gives enough space for the history of civil rights in Mississippi to be told on its own.
Yeah.
But there's also sort of the option to not go to the other side.
That's right. You almost feel like you got to force them.
Yeah.
You must go through this one to get to that one.
And so there are some people that come in and they go into the sort of the quote unquote regular Mississippi history
regular
side.
museum.
But they don't ever go to the other side. And I feel like that is, in a sense, it's such a picture of what even we're seeing today with how we tell our history. This poem is called "The Waters of My Weeping," and it's written in reflection on Luke chapter 3, verse 20, where Jesus finds out that his cousin John has been arrested. One of my brothers, my cousins, added to the number of your incarcerated masses. 1 in 3 of us. Unarmed? Yes. A threat? Yes. To your abuse of power and the way you sit so comfortably in your palace while we struggle to eat out in these streets. But in this hour, I weep. Again. For this innocent man baptized into your carceral system. Immersed into this jail with no bail. I am forced to witness this unholy sacrament. This state-sponsored religious act. And for what? Something about his person disturbed you. Maybe by passing him through these waters, you will convert him to the faith of unsacred silence. one way or another. I'm sorry that it frightens you when we fight for our humanity. But tonight, I cry. These tears have become my food. I dip myself in the pool of the waters of my weeping. For my brother, for my cousin, for all of us, until they stop locking us up.
Many of us feel increasing anger at injustice, violence, and indifference in our world today. Join us March 14th for What Do I Do With My Anger? An online gathering featuring Richard Rohr and Brian McLaren. Learn ways of transforming anger into loving action. Inspired by Father Richard's new book, The Tears of Things. Register today at cac.org/anger. That's cac.org/ANGER.
So, grandfather from North Carolina.
Anderson, South Carolina.
Anderson, South Carolina. Family, New York, Philly.
Yeah.
What about the other side of the family? Southern roots, or?
Well, don't we all in some sense? So my mom's side of the family, I know that I have a bunch of family in Philly. I don't know the full extent. I know that I have some family down in Maryland. Beyond that, I don't know where everybody's at. But one of the stories so we had a family reunion several years ago, and my aunt, she did a lot of the sort of family tree work, trying to get all the stuff together as much as she could. And one of the stories that she told that stuck with me was about how she found just some information about our family pre-emancipation and how the family, all of the children, right, they had very sort of European names for, until the first child that was born post-emancipation.
Okay.
And they named him Senegal. And they named him Senegal, right, as a marker to the family of where we were from, so that we wouldn't forget, so that we wouldn't know.
I love it.
So I love that that's part of my history, my family, and that we need to understand who we are,
Yeah. Do your girls' names, you don't have to name them here if you don't want to. Some of us keep our kids private, but do their names have meaning in your family story or in the story of America?
Yeah. So Zora, I have a daughter named Zora. So she's named after Zora Neale Hurston.
Yeah.
My other daughter is named Suhaila.
Ooh.
Suhaila has Swahili roots. It has both Swahili and Arabic roots, and it means gentle, easy-spirited, but also star.
Okay.
Which really, if you know her, it's fitting.
It fits?
Yeah, it fits. It fits. And Zora's name is actually, it means dawn. And so there's this sort of,
Dawn.
yeah.
Okay.
I think both of them in their own ways really kind of are living into their names.
Yeah, I love that. I love to think about origins of names. Jacqueline comes from Jack, Jock, Jacob, which means heel grabber. Hello. Did I grab anybody's heels? No. But I'm named after Jackie Kennedy. But I do think about the naming of our children as prescriptive or something, right? We have a little grandbaby named Octavius, who's named after Octavius Cato, freedom fighter in Philadelphia. I wanted to make that connection there. His dad and mom named him that, so he'd know he was supposed to fight for love, fight for freedom. Big sister Ophelia, named for a song that they love. But I think about our little people, Drew. I think about your daughters that are 7, my niece and nephew that are littler, 10 and 13, and another pair are 29 and 31. I think about 2-year-old Octavius, 4-year-old Ophelia, and our Black present. And I'm so in awe of how far we've come. I cannot believe how much Black excellence, Black joy, Black resistance, Black science, Black mystics, Black teachers, preachers, writers, poets, Drew Jackson, Black goodness, parenting that has happened over these centuries here in this nation. And at the same time, I'm frightened at about how intractable whiteness is. I love Wajahat Ali has a new book out and he calls it The Whiteness, but like whiteness, friends, in quotes, like white supremacy, white nationalism, white people, not ethnic, Polish, German, British, but just the construct of whiteness created opposite Blackness to perpetrate a fraud of inequality. I'm stunned at the lengths to which our electeds, our public officials, our pundits, the media are going like they're in death throes to continue to stay, right? It makes my head hurt. I'm tired today. You and I started I look tired. I am so tired of the morass. Talk about that. What are your feelings about that?
The idea of whiteness as a power. Willie Jennings often talks about whiteness as this power that is always moving toward ownership of, power over, dominion over. In any space that it's in, it owns, or it believes it owns. And when that is being challenged, which I think we're seeing that, we're seeing the challenge of that.
Yeah.
I think that what you described as the death throes is what you get, the sort of, I'm going to hold on to what I believe is life.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is my ownership of this space, my voice being the preeminent voice in this space, my ideas and ideologies, my heroes, all of that being first and center. So I think what we're experiencing is the push against that and the challenge and the trying to hold on to dear life.
Right.
Instead of letting go, right? There's this someone said, if you save your life, you'll lose it, right? If you
well,
right.
Somebody
said it.
I'd love to think about you, Drew, as a younger African American man. Where's your hope? And what's love got to do with it?
I'm a poet.
I know.
And so one of the first things that comes to my mind when I think of that word hope is, what did Emily Dickinson say? Hope is the thing with feathers, right? It's this sense of, it's always there, but it's sort of flying away, and there's this move to sort of grasp it, in a sense. And so there are days where it's like, where's my hope? I don't know. It's gone off somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
But then there are days where the hope lands on my shoulder, like and it's close and it's singing. It's singing.
Oh, it's close and singing.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And so the invitation is to listen and to sing along with it. So for me, when I think about that, I do think about my daughters. And I think about the ways that they, even at 7 years old, have this thing within them that understands what justice is, that understands they have this light within them. And, one of the things that one of my daughter's teachers said to them, or said to us in one of their parent-teacher conferences, she said, your daughter is the most salt of the earth person I've ever met.
Salt of the earth person.
What? And but I was like, wow, what can I learn from her about what that means, about what it means to be a salt of the earth sort of person?
Wow.
I watched a lot. I watched them a lot. I observed them a lot during lockdown, during quarantine. And it was a disruption for all of us, right?
Right.
But they were taken out of what had become a normal rhythm for them, being in school and having to flip to this online, like all of these different things. And as I'm watching them, I see in them this ability to create beauty and joy in the midst of, and now they didn't fully have a concept of like what all is happening, but they knew something's not right. But in this something's not right, there's this ability to create out of that and to give it away, to invite, to constantly inviting me into that and mom into that, and knowing that things are heavy, but there's hey, would you, we just made up this game in our room. Come play with us.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that is, it's the hope is always creating this beauty and joy and an invitation to come and sit with it in the midst of everything else that's going on. Not dismissing everything else, but saying, how do I take what's here and create beauty out of it? I think that is, it's the Spirit hovering over the chaos sort of hope that creates out of that.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so creating not out of, like, there was a void, but actually there's not a void. There was confusion. There was chaos. There was all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
But out of that, creation.
Yes.
Ooh, Drew.
Yes.
You are a poet. I'm going to read something to you and ask you to tell me about it. Are you ready? I did not awaken in memory of Amir Locke. I did not awaken at 6:48 a.m. to the sound of screaming police who had no warrant for me, yet somehow had a key to my apartment. I did not awaken at 6:48 a.m., rubbing the crust out of my eyes to find myself surrounded by officers tricked out in tactical gear. I did not awaken at 6:48 a.m., having to reach to protect myself against the ones who had come to protect and serve. I did not awaken at 6:48 a.m., throwing off the blanket, keeping me warm, to be met by bullets piercing my flesh, covered in blood, body now cold. I did not awaken. That's you, Drew Jackson, y'all. A poem in honor of Amir Locke. From whence did that come, Drew?
What was happening for me was just imagining Amir waking up and being stirred awake by the sound of a door being burst open, screaming, officers, all of this happening within the span of just a few seconds before he's shot. And so as I'm sitting there on the edge of my bed, I just couldn't, I'm trying to, in that moment, sit with Amir as best as I know how. And both give voice to so much of my own pain at this reality that it seems to just keep happening over and over and over again. And thinking about stories of instances of my own life where I could have been Amir or Tamir, or Trayvon, or the list goes on. And it wasn't, for me, it was like, okay, I'm just going to write this because I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
I just don't know what else to do.
I'm grateful for your voice, in your church, for your voice as a poet, as a dad, as a husband, as a son. At the CAC, are you still connected?
I am.
Yeah. Prayers for Richard always. I'm thinking, Drew, about Black future.
Yes.
So I'm not like Afrofuturist girl necessarily, but I am thinking about Black future. And I wonder if Zora and Suhaila and Rio and RJ and Octavius and Ophelia are listening to this someday, Drew. And Drew, the poet, had just a few words to say to our people, to our little people, Drew, about a Black future. What might you say?
I would read a poem.
Good.
It's a poem called The Power of Parable. And I wrote it just thinking about just that, the ways that parable and story have always functioned among our people. Mm-hmm. And the poem has an epigraph from Octavia Butler's The Parable of the Sower. And it says, "The destiny of earth's seed is to take root among the stars."
Ooh, yes.
Down through the ages, we've passed down wisdom through story. This is what the scholars call oral tradition. We simply call it living. Because there is no life without the elders gifting us their parabolic insight. Subversive, like Octavia's earthseed. They unearth the power of our humanity that has been covered by years of subjugation, reminding us of our connection to the divine. They tell us of things certain folks fear, things those on top do not want us to hear. So give ear when these stories are uttered. It is here that we must do battle, rattling the cages of evil with the power of parable.
Rattling the cages of evil with the power of parable. Yeah. Beautiful, Drew. What's that book?
Yes, this is God Speaks Through Wombs.
God Speaks Through Wombs, Drew Jackson. Drew, what do you know for sure about love?
That love is always expanding. It is always pressing up against the boundaries that we have set, pushing us further, wider. When we think love can only go this far, love says, no, let me take you out a little bit further. It's the invitation that says, come and see with me. That is what I know for sure about love.
Beautiful. And when I say fierce love, what comes up for you?
It's the image of resurrection that comes up for me. It's the refusal for love to stay buried underneath the ground. It bursts through announcing that a new day is here.
Lovely. Absolutely beautiful. Drew, we have come over a way that with tears has been watered. And I'm really glad for this conversation with you today as we think about Black history and Black present and Black future. Many blessings to you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Love Period, a special series we put together for Black History Month. As an African-American woman who grew up in this nation, I think about the poet James Weldon Johnson, who says about my people, we have come over a way that with tears has been watered. I think about the tears of my ancestors, watering the soil of America, tears baptizing my hope, tears that are often tears of joy, because we've learned how to make a way out of no way. Black history, Black heritage, it's everyone's history. These stories belong to all of us. And I hope because you've listened to these episodes, you feel connected and that you'll dig and do some research about Black folks in America.